Okay, thank you. And good afternoon. So Venla is recording this if it's okay for everybody participating, and I'll try to share my slides and put them to presentation mode as well. Hopefully you can see them now. Okay, so future of Arctic tourism is the topic, and as you can see many logos down there. This is related to several projects. So ACAF is one, and we are now in its webinar. But Arctic Hubs has been a Horizon project which started in 2020 and ended last July. So in that project, Horizon 2020 project, which was coordinated by Luke, I was a co-coordinator of the project. So we have been doing quite a lot of work in relation to tourism as well, and most of my speech is related to the results of that project. And then you can see the logo of Mount Resilience, which is an ongoing project about climate change adaptation, and it's not really Arctic project, it's actually mountainous project, and from the Arctic the only area is the northernmost parts of Finland, so Enontekiö and Utsjoki municipalities. But it very much relates to similar issues, and tourism and reindeer herding are the most important livelihoods that we are looking at about their adaptation. So here we have a map of the Arctic Hubs project. So we didn't have Canada and we did have Russia in the beginning, but not at the last stages of the project from obvious reasons. And we have in this where I have the circles like Nuuk, Greenland, Westfjords, Iceland, Faroe Islands, Suðuroy in Faroe Islands, and then Inari in Finnish Lapland. We have had this kind of future workshops and forums, and in all these hubs, tourism has been really central issue. In addition, we have had these more grey circles in Svalbard, in Varangerfjord in Norway, and in Egersund in Norway. So they are also our tourism hubs, and we have been doing some work in those as well, not as much as in these other areas. And then we have had, which is very much related to this ACAF project and the topic of that, so this youth issue, and we had International Youth Future Workshop in Inari together with ACAF project. So this has been a common thing to what we have done together with the projects. And as you can see from the map, the situations are quite different. We are talking about Arctic, but Arctic, of course, is not like one area with one issue and one tourism type of tourism, but several. And cruise ship tourism, of course, is more important for these more marine areas and Atlantic areas, while the inland tourism is more important for Finland, for Sweden, northern Norway, parts of northern Norway. So just to keep in mind that there are differences, but there are also similarities between these areas. And what can be said of these similarities is that tourism in the Arctic, it has been seen as beneficial for the economy and demography of these remote regions, and this remoteness and quite difficult accessibility and long distances is kind of common. But of course, that's also relative. If we think of Canadian Arctic, it's much more difficult to access. So this European Arctic and Scandinavian areas especially are like more easy to access. But it has been said in many cases that tourism is an industry that really is growing in these areas and is maybe the only one which is growing. So it's also it looks like that when we are looking at some tourist destinations, like in Finland, some municipalities in Finnish Lapland which are growing are exactly tourism destinations and are growing because of tourism. So that really affects to many locations and places. And what is also said is that tourism is soft and sustainable compared to more extractive use of natural resources like mining, for example, and or forestry maybe. So it's something that is not as overarching, and it grows more like gradually and in small steps, which means, for example, that tourism growth seldom demands like environmental impact assessment or other that kind of procedures. That might be also a bit disadvantage because there are like small steps and small developments in tourism, and the kind of the total picture might be sometimes missing. But it's also seen as a part of local and decentralized way of life. So in its kind of a small scale tourism, it feels like part of the local way of life and not separate of that. But of course, as we know, there are quite many challenges. And what has happened lately in the Arctic, there has been really rapid growth. The number of international commercial overnight stays, for example, in Tromsø in Norway, has increased a lot. If we compare 2008, it was 18,000 overnight stays during winter season, and 10 years later it was 200,000 overnight stays. And of course, since 2018 it has been growing. There was this COVID, which affected really a lot to tourism statistics. But after that, there were a lot of discussion about what this COVID situation means for tourism. Will there be different kind of tourism after that? Will it be kind of more sustainable? Will people want to travel in their own countries? Do they want to travel close by home? But it seems that the growth has been going like before 2019. And this uneven growth also, for example, in Iceland, a lot has been spoken about Iceland as an example of over-tourism and having these disadvantages of tourism. But still, like in our hub, this Westfjords in Northwest Iceland, it only gets 2% of the overnight stays of whole Iceland. So it means that it's tourism doesn't touch all the places, all the locations in the Arctic. So it's there are those destinations which might suffer from over tourism, but there are of course also places which really would like to have more tourists. And then this term Arctification, which kind of describes the situation that Arctic is really hot in a sense that it really attracts tourists nowadays. And also that there are, because of this growth, and there are those kind of travelers who are not really used to winter conditions. They are attracted by this kind of nice pictures of snow, ice, and northern lights and other experiences, but that might also lead to some problems if only those that kind of really Arctic stereotypic images are shared. But there are, of course, like if we think of this growth and this over tourism concept, it's not so good concept in a sense that it doesn't, as said, it doesn't cover the whole region, but it's there are some places where there are tourists at the same time doing same things, And that might lead to this kind of seasonal and local crowdedness, which might be not so good for local community and not so good for tourists themselves, because they suffer from the crowdedness as well. But it can also be a question of bad management and, for example, insufficient infrastructure. So there is not possibility to answer to that kind of growth. And then there are also these safety issues and environmental damages, for example, and issues for local life. So we have heard in Finland, in Finnish Lapland, we have heard a lot of this discussion about these Airbnbs and tourists disturbing people's everyday lives. And also, of course, raising rents for houses. So housing problems are part of that. And also there is this fear of benefits going outside the local communities. What we have been looking in Arctic Hubs project is that how these global industries come into the Arctic. And well, there has been some results that some other industries are much worse in that sense. So they are more global, and tourism companies are often locally owned and quite small scale. So different from mining companies or aquaculture companies as well. And then land use issues is one question, because tourism is often or mainly nature-based in these areas. And there is competition for land, even though it might feel that these wilderness areas are really vast and sparsely populated, but they are used for different purposes. So I'll come a bit closer to these issues soon. But then there are those word clouds, and they are from the Arctic Youth Workshop, which was held in Inari. And it was kind of interesting that in the upper one, there is this tourism, not with very strong color, but quite big letters. So they raised the question of tourism more than maybe other workshops. So for young people, it was like more maybe a threat than an opportunity. And that was kind of interesting. We had 15 young people from Iceland, Greenland, not Faroe Islands, Iceland, Greenland, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. And they were discussing about the future threats and opportunities. And they were saying that tourism is usually marketed as a benefactor for remote regions, but these downsides are rarely mentioned. They were comparing to mining, for example, that there are a lot of discussion about mining and its problems, but tourism is often just seen as a really good one. But they were saying that these kind of must-see places and especially wilderness areas are becoming overcrowded, and also about cruise tourism, that it's not socially sustainable. And below there is these opportunities, and community and people and remote work, for example, were seen as the most important opportunities for these areas. New residents as well. But going a bit to these challenges a bit closer, although I still want to say that I see that tourism has really many benefits for these areas. It's just a question of, or not maybe just, but mainly a question of management and control. And we were mapping, this was done among reindeer herders in Inari, this kind of mapping that what are the land use issues, how the different land uses conflict with each other. And there were these blue squares, dog sledding, that was seen maybe as the worst thing for reindeer herders, and it was also criticized by others as well in Inari. So dog sledding is quite a problem there, and it was also seen that it's not based on local culture, so that is also a kind of problem, that it's something, and it really would need a lot of management, but it's not really managed because almost anyone can come and and start the business there. And then there were other tourism issues like snowmobiling, tourism in large, and traffic issues. And there are those red dots or red bombs, which mean that there are several issues, and often tourism was part of them. So there is quite a lot to do for managing these different land use modes. And this is quite similar thing in other areas which we were examining in this Arctic Hubs project. Another thing which was we were writing about and studying about is this cruise tourism, and it, as you can see in those graphs on the right, that it has been growing really rapidly, especially in Greenland, but also in Iceland, which is below. And there is, as said, significant escalation, and it often takes place in small communities, small coastal communities. And there are, of course, economic benefits for these communities, but there is also quite a lot of social and environmental stress related to that. And it's also non-local ownership, and in that sense, maybe one of the most unsustainable modes of tourism in those areas. And it's very difficult to see how local stakeholders could contribute. They can sell something, people coming to on the shore, but still it's quite problematic. And there are a lot of environmental issues related to cruise tourism as well, and disturbance of wildlife and fuel spills and so on, greenhouse gas emissions. And it's in many cases in the Arctic, it's like last chance tourism to go and look at the icebergs, or also to see them before they disappear. And I have all these references at the end of the presentation, so you can also get the presentation later on. Another case which I want to raise here is there are several, as I said about this over tourism or overcrowding, there are several locations and which are seasonally kind of overcrowded. Korooma in Posio, Finland is an interesting case. It's a nature reserve. It's administered by Metsähallitus, the Finnish administrator of state-owned lands. And it's a really spectacular steep canyon, and tourism season is midwinter because that is the highest season in Finnish Lapland. And many companies from Rovaniemi, from hundreds or around 100 kilometers from that area, make trips there. It gets crowded at sometimes. It's very slippery. It's really demanding area because it's really steep, and also there is no mobile phone signal, for example. So safety issues are really big issues there. And Metsähallitus is just doing development plan for Korooma because it really needs that. And there has been like saving operations which are quite demanding, and it's always, of course, sometimes like incorrect equipment. If people go there like individual tourists, they don't maybe know about coldness, darkness, and it's really slippery. So it really needs a lot of or more infrastructure and upkeeping, but that's not really anybody's task to do that. So it really needs also more cooperation. We were there with a group of students doing their field work, and they are now looking at what to do with the area. And as you can see in the pictures below, first there is this spectacular or this frozen water wall, and you can see a person there, and that is from one advertisement of the tourism company, and that's of course not allowed to go there. So there are like danger signs all around, but still it's advertised like this. And also because it's nature reserve, you should stay on the path, but as you can see, people are coming from the forest, because it's not possible to stay on the path if you don't have like spikes on your shoes, and it's difficult to really make it a must to have the spikes. So these kinds of cases exist. We also know from Norway, for example, Trolltungen, where local people use their time to voluntarily rescue people because they go without good equipment. And that is something that is really, really growing, because more and more tourists coming and not so well prepared. Then we have this climate change adaptation, which is a big issue for Nordic tourism as well, because lack of snow is one of the first things that happen. And of course, we have seen that already, for example, in Finland, in southern parts of Finland, the companies really have to adapt. They have to take tourists further away to see snow. And now at this time, we can really see that. So they are really vulnerable for climate change. And maybe this adaptation, it needs really more attention, and also like new products. This high season in early winter is quite problematic for Finnish Lapland, and also Swedish Lapland as well. And for example, Tromsø. Northern lights remain, but also climate change affects to cloudiness and so on. So I would say changes are needed. In our policy brief and in these future workshops, we identified several issues, and one which was common for almost all of these hubs where we worked was that more benefits of tourism should be directed to local communities. And this question of tourism taxes or fees, I think many of us know that in Southern Europe, for example, there are those city taxes for tourists, 1 or 2 euros per day or so. And it really needs more research here. How should they be applied? And I know that there are attempts to have this kind of taxes or fees in Norway and also in Greenland. So in Finland, there has been discussion, and there is the strategy for northern part of Finland in government, and it's also noted there that should be maybe tried. There should be a pilot for that. So of course, there is also a question what to do with that money if that's collected from tourists. So then it really should be directed to local level and maybe for the infrastructure or environmental to compensate environmental damages or something like that. And that's not so easy, and it's quite complicated thing to do, but I think that will come. Then this long-term planning focusing on sustainable practices and community well-being. So more planning, more control and monitoring of visitors. So to realize the potential of tourism and minimize the risks, that kind of planning is really required. And coordination of tourism activities with local development goals and responsible land use was one thing that was mentioned. And I think these issues of control and monitoring came especially from Greenland and Faroe Islands, which are kind of really rapidly growing destinations and are kind of lacking. In Greenland, for example, there is a Tourism Act just on preparation, so that might affect to the situation. And then developing year-round tourism and also remote working opportunities, as was already mentioned in that word cloud. So that was also a hope to make it more even round the year. And that has been a target for a long time. Of course, that is the problem of all tourist destinations, that there is high season, like in Mediterranean, for example, and then there are low seasons, and that means that people can't settle to those places. So getting new residents and more permanent and solving the housing problem, for example, that's something that is needed for that. And this promoting quality over quantity, it was kind of ideal, but of course, tourism companies are wanting to have more customers all the time, and there is not really any visible change in that. But this kind of luxury tourism has been discussed quite a lot, so that people would pay more for, there would be less people paying more, but still there are also like voices that if there are luxury tourists, they are even more far away from the local everyday life, and they don't have any contacts to local life. So that is an issue as well. Here, just to summarize somehow these different levels. So this is by Eva Kajan, written 10 years ago, but the same issues remain. So this in the middle, the community level. So the role of tourism in locals' life has been growing since 2014, and still the companies are small in size, locations are rural, and all these issues remain. And then there is this local development level, these endogenous factors and climate change impacts on the local level all the time growing. And then these exogenous factors like global economy and climate scenarios. So I won't go into detail to this, but anyway, these are mainly the issues affecting tourism into Arctic. And what about the future? There is a lot of discussion about sustainability, responsibility. There is this term of regenerative tourism, with the idea that tourism should give more to the places where tourists come than to take. So like leaving the environment, for example, better than in the beginning when they came. So that kind of discussion, but how about the reality of these kind of ideas? Maybe that's something to talk about. And climate change, for sure, will be the issue in future. There are sustainability certificates, so tourism companies are adapting, and they might be like really necessary. So that's kind of basic demand that companies have this kind of sustainability certificates, but we can always ask if they are enough. And I think many say that they are not enough. People are thinking that some of them are just greenwashing. And maybe also in relation to climate change, this acting according to natural conditions. So having like products which are adjusted to natural conditions, and not trying to make this snow in October when it doesn't really come, and which it's costly, and it's not really good for the environment and energy use and all that. Those issues remain. And this responsible tourism, it's actually interesting what Richard Sharpley has said about this, how tourists don't really want to be responsible. So they are kind of out of home and out of their everyday life. So they want to be tourists and want to be free. So for example, water use, it's not so easy to restrict that. And he's saying that it's better to direct efforts to planning organizations, management, and legislation, and that might be true. And then also these questions of justice. So who is benefiting of tourism in future, and who is suffering from that? So there should be some kind of mechanisms to safeguard local daily life and share the benefits somehow equally. So thank you. This is what I wanted to say, and then I think we will continue with Meredith. I also have the references here, but I will stop it here.
I can already see plenty of applause coming with these virtual hands. Always a joy to see. Thank you, Seija. I hope you can hear me speaking now. I have opened my microphone.
Yes.
Very good, very good. No, thank you. That was really densely packed with a lot of information in your talk. I think everybody online was hanging on your every word. But now is time for people to get even more active in the chat and write any questions that might have occurred to them during the presentation. And at this point, I am delighted to say I noticed that Meredith is online. Actually, you are online in at least once, possibly twice, into the meeting. Meredith, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Excellent. And apologies if I completely messed up your surname a second ago.
Okay.
My colleagues will tell you that I'm absolutely hopeless with pronunciation of any surname, so
It's okay.
very lucky to have a very simple one that everybody knows. Anyway, thank you for joining us. And just to introduce you very briefly from my side, that you are, as I understand it, the marketing and communication and community manager for Nordic Odyssey. Maybe you could give a little bit more of introduction to yourself and then open the dialogue or conversation with Seija. Would that be okay for you?
Yeah, sure.
Excellent. I'll turn my camera off. If you wish to turn yours on, please do, if you have the rights to be able to do that in this meeting.
I think Meredith has her camera on, but
I just can't see it. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I do have my camera on, but not with the mic. Like that's why I have like
okay.
That's a problem with my computer. So I have the camera on the computer and the mic on the phone. So yeah, I hope it's not a problem.
Not a problem. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, a little bit about myself. I would say that I landed in Finland, in the south in Tampere, 7 years ago as a student, and then I studied leadership management, social studies, and then I joined Nordic Odyssey 2 years ago when I moved to Lapland to experience a bit the Arctic and more outdoor-based lifestyle, even more than it used to be in Tampere. So, and yeah, I found myself there, and I'm really keen on discussing a bit more about the development of tourism here, as I believe it echoes quite much what Seija just discussed during 30 minutes before, because there are like a lot of positive aspects I believe to this region and the economic growth, but it's important as it is a rapid growth to discuss the challenges. So
okay, maybe we continue together. So you said that you have seen I'm sure you know tourism field here very well. So what would you say, what comes into your mind first if you think of the tourism in Finnish Lapland in the areas you work?
Busy. I guess it's a very busy place, and especially like during the winter season, I would say I think sustainability would be the main word here. I think it's the target of us all, and also as Finland is one of the figure in Europe and in general for sustainability, for close to nature. And in that, I think when thinking about tourism in Finnish Lapland, it's important to think about nature and how we are like working with it and respecting it and educating tourists about it. So and then it's also about the all year round tourism. I think this is like the main challenge that the city has, or Visit Rovaniemi will to develop, and I think it's the main goal also and one of the solution uh, to uncrowd the winter season here. So yeah, but
So do you have any examples or good examples of sustainable actions by companies or bad examples maybe regarding sustainability?
well, bad examples they're like all over the city center, I would say. But I think like sustainability, they're like the three pillars. So of course we can discuss about the environmental part. So main example would be also the main or the overuse of like engines. So like all this no mobile, and like now we can talk about very current issue which happening now, like the lack of snow and like all the creativity that companies have to have fake snow and this kind of, I think you were just discussing about it, like this kind of like concept of Lapland as the winter wonderland and not accepting that it might be delayed or then a bit different, that there would be less snow and the landscape would be a bit less nice than on Instagram and so on. So, and I think there is this urge from the companies to to feed this kind of like imaginary around Lapland, which I think it's really harmful. And I think there is like a lot of other activities that are snowless or like we at least like focus also on like Finnish lifestyles, which is like also other activities such as like sauna, ice fishing, and also different hikes that you don't need like snowshoes. So and then there is of course then the responsibility in the driving on the roads. From tourists themselves, and then from the new guides it's also about like training your staff properly, taking enough time to train the local guides here, so then they are the ones who are then educating tourists, and for that you need sustainability, social sustainability, meaning that it's the treatment of your employees, the working hours, tiredness and so on, which leads then to, for example, mistakes and safety issues and so on. So I think there are different aspects, and also like engaging with local communities. This is also a huge part and challenge of the local tourism, as it's a bubble, an international bubble that got created here. And for that, I don't know. I wouldn't say that foreign entrepreneurs are worse than sometimes Finnish entrepreneurs here. So I think it's just about like all cooperating towards one main goal, which is like preserving the region. So
Yeah, there was a lot of things, and you mentioned this winter wonderland and this now non-existing winter wonderland. How do you get any feedback from your customers of that issue?
every day. We had to cancel, for example, when we think about that's another aspect when we think about activities here. Well, you were also discussing about this, and like the main things are reindeer, husky, and northern lights, and snowmobile. Well, snowmobile we're less concerned because we don't do those. But then, like when those activities are cancelled because of the weather for the northern lights, or because of the weather for the husky, that there is not enough snow, people are just they're disappointed, they're confused on why so. They have And there is this thing now also that we see with the low cost flights. People have less planned their journey. They have less maybe saved money. They have less, like it's just about this kind of weekend trip that they do to Lapland as they would do to any European capital. And it's a really serious matter because like they are not aware of the situation here, and they also don't even try to educate themselves on why so why why would it be, and that we are one of the northern region, and those parts are also highly affected by climate change and these kind of things that they just come here and they're like, okay, well, can you do anything? And what what can I do? Asking for snow to fall from the sky, and then like it's very, so of course we're trying to find alternatives to them, and then they're more and more willing to do more than nature activities because they're here, they have nothing else to do. So then it's the good time for us to play a key role instead of just like sending them back home disappointed, is to tell them that there's other things to do that are really worth of doing that they wouldn't have think about. So
What about, I was thinking that we usually have a plenty of snow during February and March. Could that be possible to kind of move the high season? Because this is the worst time, this is the most insecure time regarding snow this early winter, and it will become worse actually along climate change.
Sure thing. But there are two parameters to have to take into account. The main one is the Christmas time, and the Santa Claus village. Rovaniemi has become a platform of tourism thanks to Santa Claus. So then we would need to communicate about this kind of Christmas magic in a way, also all winter around, that like it also exists during February, and it's an entire kind of atmosphere that doesn't end when Christmas is over. So the first part. The other part is that like for us at least, like it's not less of a busy in February and March already. So I would say that the only thing is just to accept that they're if they didn't plan their trip enough in advance, then they have to postpone it to the year after. And I think this is like something that needs to be accepted from the companies and from the tourists themselves, that like we should set limits, that if like it's fully booked on the hotels, on the Airbnb, and on the company, on the husky and the rangers, that they can't like overwork, then that's it, and they should just come next year or the year after or then in summer.
Yeah. Okay, maybe a question about this engaging with local communities. You were mentioned that, and also I know you have been speaking about this Nordic lifestyle, what people might be interested of. But how do you see the relationship with local community, and how can like locals benefit from tourism?
I think it's a really sensitive issue, and I think it hasn't even been thought so much when tourism started to overgrow, because it was really fast. I think it's easier during summertime, as also locals are more active in general in the nature, and they're more outside, outdoor. And so we also see that we can, like, we rent, for example, a lot of equipment, and we have like a special prices for locals. And this is also very much going on in the summer for canoeing, for hiking, and then also training our guides and our staff with some local knowledge to help also them or us to educate the tourists in the to respect, you know, local people, and also to act the same way as local would do, or at least in a similar way that is not so harmful. So then like that way the tourists wouldn't like be a burden so much for the locals, and it would be nice to encounter new people as well, because of course tourism has a lot of benefits. Like in general, when tourists come, they don't only like benefit from activities, but also they need to work with the hotels and the restaurants, and they consume a lot, and the shops also, like for souvenirs, like it's really interesting also to get more places where souvenirs would be handmade, and this is also what we recommend more than uh, made in China souvenirs. So also that is like, and encouraging them to go to the museum during their holidays as well.
Yeah.
And these type of things are like, when you do a program for the tourists, you don't fill up necessarily all the days, but with your activities only. You also encourage them to include other activities, which can be, for example, the museums and so on.
So how do you see your clients? How are they? What kind of people you are targeting to? Are they international tourists or maybe also domestic tourists? No.
Unfortunately, in winter we do not have any domestics except for the rental. We do have some, mainly in the second part of the winter for like the skis, the snowshoes, and sometimes even for kids, like trollers and also the fat bikes. But mainly in summer we do have like engage with Finnish people who are coming actually from south most of the time and just want to visit Lapland, and they don't have so much knowledge, to be honest, on on the tracks, on the equipment and so on. They have this like basic nature knowledge, but then the rest, it's kind of interesting to share also with them. Our tourists are mainly French-speaking people because it's our requirement in our company. But we also have like many nationalities. So, but we are doing all our marketing efforts towards having a more outdoor and let's say active, more than sporty, but active to sporty people. So then we could do more interesting, actually, activities outdoor that for us. So yeah.
Yeah, I have somehow image. I don't know. It's not any research based on any research, but how do you see? Do French people look for more authentic experiences, maybe than some other nationalities? This is a bit stereotypic question, but
Um, well, but this kind of also has a problem. It's like it's the exotic part. Like you could fall also in that part. So some people are like, they're aware and they want something like respectful from the animals and from the environment. We also, like you were discussing about this luxury tourism. I don't like I see luxury. There are different like aspects to luxury, but I think more than luxury, I think it's more premium. It's about like having private experiences that are a bit more expensive, but they are more like respectful towards different aspects, and you're also like, you're not in buses with 50 people going to places, but you're taken care more like privately with a guide, and you learn more, when also the guide speaks your language, takes the time to explain to you different things. Then at the end of the week they have learned something. They don't remember everything, but they have learned something. So, and in that case you don't target people who are rich, but people who also have plan their trip more carefully. They have saved for their family, and then they're like, okay, we can afford not so cheap tourism in that way. So I think this is the difference between this and the luxury, where like I think the concept of it can also be discussed, but
yeah.
but yeah, but then in also like they want to, for example, to meet Lappish people or so, and we have to explain to them a bit about this, like this whole concept of like I think this is a very touchy aspect about indigenous communities and like cultural appropriation and all that, but there is this whole trend about meeting like indigenous communities in their own lifestyle and all that, and I think here it's a bit different than in some other like conception that they have of other parts in the world where there are indigenous communities. So I think it's more about that.
Okay, so I think there are a lot of comments and questions, but if you will really shortly say about the future of Arctic tourism, threats, opportunities, how do you see that?
Well, I think there should be a collective responsibility regarding the Arctic tourism. I think like the labels, they're like somehow a good initiative, but if there is no control over it, like it doesn't matter if you're a label of sustainable, but if you're sending 8 vans into Koroma every day, this is not like instead of one bus, then where is the sustainability here? So I think there should be an acceptance of like limitation of winter tourism and trying to take risk into spreading the tourism over the year and the people. So I think that's where it should be. And maybe like now we see also with the farms and the animals, we see like everyone is full booked, and then once this is booked, then tourists also turn towards more activities that are hiking and so on. So maybe then the future is to not overly develop kennels and rangers and so on, but just like trying to turn into more nature-based activities.
Okay, thank you. I think that was really nice insights. So is it Venla or John who takes the...
I was just going to say, I really appreciate Meredith, her questions and the conversation you've just had. I think it opened up a lot of the topics that, say, you'd already told us. And whilst you have been talking, people have been